We have a trade to announce. Colorado acquires Sharks goaltender Devan Dubnyk. What's coming back? How will this impact the Sharks and the Barracuda, for that matter? Let's talk about it right now. This is Teal Town Live. Good afternoon, everyone. April 10th, 2021. And the San Jose Sharks don't have their backup goaltender anymore. Devan Dubnyk is off to the Colorado Avalanche in exchange for a fifth-round pick in this year's draft, along with defenseman Greg Pateryn. And Devan Dubnyk off to go get a cup, potentially, as the Colorado Avalanche bolster their goaltending. Welcome to Teal Town Live. We do this whenever news breaks, so if you want to be part of the show, chat with us and fellow Sharks fans on the page or the app. Of course, follow us on the social, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. It does go a long way to helping us out. Along with all the other social medias at tealtownusa.com. All right. Kevin, it seems only appropriate that we have you do with a voice.
So it's April 10th. It's 2 days before the trade deadline. And as recent trade deadlines have come and gone, you find that more often than not, it's the Saturday before the deadline, like right now,
right,
where you get the good old line of, "We have a trade to announce. We have several trades to announce, one including the San Jose Sharks. We're going to talk about it."
All right. I wasn't expecting that buildup, but thank you, Kevin. All right.
Oh yeah, we gotta go big. Been holding the Batman back all season.
I have a feeling. Oh, jeez. All right. So, well, let's get into it. The Sharks get a fifth-round pick in this year's draft. They get defenseman Greg Pateryn. I'm assuming that's more
it's Pateryn.
Pateryn. Well, thank you for telling me that now. And
you said it right in the before we came on. You said it right multiple times.
You know, it's they didn't get me for my pronounceability. My puzzles on Wheel of Fortune were that easy. But so Devan Dubnyk is now a member of the Colorado Avalanche. You get this guy. You're going to get a pick in the draft. You get some defensive help. I mean, obviously, for Pateryn, it's an NHL defenseman. So do we I don't suspect something's up with Vlasic? Did Christian Jaros not produce as much as he expected it to be? I mean, what do you see from this trade directly?
Well, Eric, I think those are both valid, viable questions in this situation. I mean, with Greg Pateryn, he's a journeyman defenseman. He's a serviceable defenseman. So let's bring it up right now that if he remains a Shark, he can be a solid but unspectacular addition to the roster if the Sharks decide that's how they want to go. For me, I look at him as being a player who's on paper only. Officially, right now, he's on the taxi squad. He was on the Avalanche taxi squad, so therefore he transfers over to the Sharks taxi squad, and then we'll see if he gets promoted. With Marc-Edouard Vlasic, it seems like, I know I haven't looked into it too much, but it seems like he's not so close to being back. And say what you will about Vlasic's play throughout this season, but the fact remains he's an NHL quality defenseman. He may not be the top tier defenseman that he once was, but he's still an important part of this team. So if he's going to be out long term, Pateryn certainly isn't going to fill Vlasic's skates, but you need to bolster your depth in any way possible if the Sharks are serious about this playoff run. And with Christian Jaros, I don't expect to see the world from him. If we were, I don't think Ottawa would have traded him in the first place. But nevertheless, Pateryn, I don't think Pateryn's the key in this. I really think it's the 5th round pick, getting the future asset for this team that is in a if you want to say a
Reset.
retool, I will say a rebuild. I'll say it if no one else wants to.
Right.
But a good trade for both teams. If you want to talk about, I'll let you speak here, but would like to get to the Dubnyk side as well.
Yeah, I mean, you hit for Devan Dubnyk. He was here, just this season, just brief time. We kind of had a sense that if the Sharks were out of it, and I think more so out of it than they are right now, just entering the day 3 points out of a playoff spot, that the would probably make a move to flip Dubnyk, similar to what they did with Patrick Marleau when they signed him, just a few days into last season, and then they flipped him for picks. Granted, a 5th round pick along with a taxi squad defenseman, I think we were expecting a little bit more, but also at the same time, you wonder if his value was reduced a little bit because, the Sharks have been rolling with Martin Jones so many games.
Definitely, and Devan Dubnyk, there were a lot of questions about his play going into the season, and I think he performed to expectations for the Sharks this year. He had some really solid games, but then he did have some stinkers as well. And with Dubnyk, I'm really curious to hear, because I haven't heard about any retained salary in that. So if Colorado, Minnesota's already absorbing half of his cap hit as it is. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Sharks aren't retaining salary on this. But with Dubnyk, Colorado's getting a quality person for one. They're getting goaltending depth that they definitely need, because if you recall last season during the playoffs, the bubble playoffs, they were down to their 3rd string Michael Hutchinson in Game 7 because Philip Grubauer can never stay healthy. Pavel Francouz has not been healthy since last year. So they definitely needed to shore up the goaltending depth. I think Dubnyk can step in if needed. I think from the Avalanche perspective, it's simply insurance, mostly for when Grubauer inevitably gets injured in the 2nd round of the playoffs this year. So I like Devan Dubnyk's game enough that I think it's a net positive for them, especially the 5th round pick. Say Colorado goes to the Cup Finals. A late 5th round pick, oh no, they're not going to be hurt by that at all. And Pateryn being on the taxi squad, they didn't see much in him. Pateryn was on the Dallas Stars a couple of years ago, and I thought he filled in very well for them, I believe on their 3rd pair for most of that season. Yeah, 73 games that season. So he was playing almost 20 minutes a night for them. And I actually recall him looking pretty good, a steady defensive presence. He's been around the league since 2014. So he's 30 years old. So if the Sharks need someone to step in, I imagine it would be Pateryn or Claesson if Pateryn remains.
Right, and that's the other thing is Frederick Claesson's still on this taxi squad as well. So you have that on the part. Vince G in the chat, and we want to thank you. Vince, no salary retained on San Jose's part. So you're looking at that. So that's a straight up trade. And also the Minnesota trade with San Jose for Dubnyk didn't have any. I think there was some salary retained by Minnesota for that. So
yeah, half of it.
So there's already a good amount going over to Colorado, so it's not too bad of a move there. But interesting comments coming into the chat, though. Shoeshine mentioning, if you've been watching other trades happening, and we'll get to some of those in just a moment.
Yeah, that's literally what I keep looking off to the side for, is I'm looking for the breaking trades.
The next one that happens, because it seems like you said, the Saturday before the deadline is when some of the pieces really start to get moving. Shoeshine...
When Reimer, sorry, we will get to Shoeshine, but Reimer and Polak, when we got them, that was 2 days before the trade deadline, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
So there you go.
But Shoeshine, if you've been watching other trades happening, it's a buyer's market right now. Nobody's value is particularly high,
Exactly.
and it's just to maybe just to wander around what's out there, and really because of the salary situation and with COVID, some of the trades that are coming up that we're going to mention haven't had that cross border talk just yet.
Right, right. You've got quarantine issues to consider. You've got expansion issues to consider. The flat salary cap. A lot of teams are pushed up against the cap this year.
Hmm.
Like we've been talking about the last week's worth of shows, talking about how the Sharks are looking to absorb other teams' cap issues. But before this Dubnyk trade, the Sharks really only had about 4 million in cap space, and so that's still not that much wiggle room. This trade opens that up. So Shoeshine's right. It's a buyer's market right now. I think the Sharks were lucky to get the fifth, and I think the Sharks could could possibly move Pateryn for maybe a seventh. It's just still, a seventh. If I'm just hypothesizing here, but it's a seventh that the Sharks don't currently have right now. So asset management right there.
And for that matter, I mean, we know this team can do wonders with later round draft picks. I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of been their ammo. And like LGRW, you're a Red Wings fan, so you know how in the past your organization has done well with late picks. This kind of gives them an extra pick. Maybe they use it to tack it on to, like, say, a third to move up to the draft later. Who knows? But here's an interesting consideration, and we'll get to this. Do you guys think that the Sharks would entertain a trade for Bernier, Jonathan Bernier? He would be an upgrade from Jones, unless Jones' recent play is the new norm. I don't want to lose Bernier for nothing in the offseason. Well, that's one thing that kind of like Shang Peng mentioned on Twitter too, Kevin, is that, with the goaltending situation as it is, so obviously Jones has won the starting job, but Doug Wilson even said earlier, and it's on our Teal Town Twitter, we think Kornash, I'm swear I'm going to get this right by the end of the season. Korshinash and Melnichuk are ready for this opportunity. Dubnyk was unbelievable, his professionalism and work ethic, and we can't thank him enough. And we got a confirmation that it is Korshinash that will be starting as the backup for tonight's game against the LA Kings.
Oh yeah, definitely. So for those of you who are not aware, Nick Nolenberger and I recorded a new episode of In the Reef last evening that unfortunately got garbled up by the Infinity Stone or something. I'm not sure what happened, but yeah. But we talked about this exact topic on the show about Koshinash. Is he ready to be an NHL goalie? And I think I don't know if the time is now, but I think the time can be now. Yusuf Koshinash has had a very, very solid year. Only 9 games, but still, he's looked like the goalie who was the all-star in his rookie year. He's been great. His numbers say otherwise. He's got a sub-900 save percentage. He's got a goals against average over 3. But those stats are complete misnomers because the level of play that he's shown on the ice night in, night out for the Barracuda has been outstanding. The games that he's made over 30 saves, he has not lost in regulation. He's been a part of a couple of blowouts, but for me, he was not at fault, and that's why his numbers are kind of imploded. Recently, you mentioned Sheng Peng. Sheng Peng, it was either Sheng or Brian Trung of San Jose Hockey Now, had a quote from Koshinash who said, I'm ready to step into an NHL role. And I think he is. I really do. And the way he's been playing, I think, pushed Dubnyk out. Melnichuk is a different situation because you mentioned him. I think Melnichuk is still trying to adjust, and the injury that he just came back from a couple of weeks ago didn't help that situation. The Sharks have done a really good job, Erik, of platooning the goalies between the taxi squad and the Barracuda roster. Essentially, what they've done all season is the one of the two who's been with the Barracuda is always starting. Whoever is the so-called backup is the goalie on the taxi squad. So Zach Sawchenko and Sam Harvey have basically just been there on paper. You might as well consider them the e-bug. It's been Melnichuk or Kozhinash all year with the Kuhre. Kozhinash has been the better goal. See, on last night's show, I did not say Kozhinash one time.
I'm sorry, I'm no Nick Nollenberger.
I got it right every time. But anyway, the struggle is real, folks. But yeah, Kozhinash, I think he's ready. But Erik, I know on the After Darks that I've joined you with on over the last few weeks, I said at that time I did not see the Sharks trading Dubnyk without acquiring another NHL goalie. And I think long term, that would still be the best solution. Because even though Kozhinash, I think, can jump into the backup role behind Jones, I think he'd still be better off finishing out the year with the Barracuda. So Jonathan Bernier is a very interesting decision to be made, as with any other goalie.
I mean, we suspected maybe the Sharks might be interested in Greiss in last offseason, Jonathan Bernier as well. It's curious that it might be Detroit, but we'll see what happens. I mean, again, we still have pretty much a little under 2 days before the deadline hits. Will the Sharks make a move? It might actually come down to tonight's game, Kevin, where if the Sharks win and they pull within a point of a playoff spot because Arizona is idle, it could be something interesting to see what they would do for that. According to Cap Friendly, and we got a number of things coming in right now. So if you're joining us, thanks for joining us. Do us a favor, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. It does go a long way. Hit that notification bell. We'll be on after the game tonight. To do that, again, for those joining us, and I see a couple that are joining us, Devan Dubnyk has been traded to the Colorado Avalanche for a 5th-round pick, and Greg Pateryn. And right now, according to Doug Wilson and Bob Bugner, it is Josef Korshinash that'll start as the backup. I shouldn't say start, but should be the backup behind Martin Jones tonight in a game against LA.
And with Kozhinash, he was called up yesterday from the Barracuda. The Barracuda are in a crazy stretch of games right now. So if it also speaks to whether or not the Sharks acquire another goalie, because they're about to play 6 games in their next 8 days, which is unheard of, and that's thanks to some reschedulings here. So the Barracuda are gonna need all hands on deck, but so do the Sharks, because obviously they're competing for a playoff spot. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't be surprised if we still see Kozhinash and Melnichuk flip-flop if no other goalie is acquired, just to make sure you're not overworking one goalie versus another. But I do expect that if one of those two is on an NHL roster and is going to play games, I think Kozhinash is the one who'd be favored to play in NHL games over Melnichuk based on what we've seen this season. I don't know if Melnichuk gets into NHL games, it's because Martin Jones has pulled. That's how I'm looking at it, and that's obviously worst case scenario.
Do you think they go full Archer's Urbe 1994, where Urbe played the majority, I think all but like a handful of games here on out? I mean, that's one way to look at it, because remember, they did trade for Reimer in 2016 to give him some rest for that playoff push. If they're still going to do that playoff push, you want to go with your number one guy, especially if you have Korshinash and Melnichuk behind you. I mean, they're maybe only getting in unless Jones is tired or injured at this point, in my mind.
Yeah, it does seem like the Sharks have, like, year after year spoken of how they're protecting Jones and trying not to overwork him, and worried about his endurance. And he's been playing a lot lately, and he's been performing well, luckily,
Right.
But I wouldn't put it past the Sharks to maybe not necessarily by trade, because you will see players go on waivers here in the next couple of days. And there are some middling, I'm not saying spectacular goalies, but there are some middling goalies who we might see go on waivers. Heck, we might see Aaron Dell go on waivers for all I know. I mean,
Wouldn't that
it's
be
very
funny?
well possible. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Sharks in the 11th hour decide, you know what, let's pluck one of these guys off waivers and keep Kojonash and Melnichuk platooning between the taxi squad and the American Hockey League. But I am curious. I have to think that there's another move to be made, because I don't see them going with no goalies on the taxi squad.
Especially if they are going to make a playoff push.
Right.
Or
Right.
are they just going to just say, we're resetting? If we make it, we make it. If not, if not.
Right. And you will not, of course, I say that now, and watch, I'll be dead wrong in a week. But I see no situation where Kojonash and Melnichuk are the NHL backup and the taxi squad goalie simultaneously. I see, because the Sharks get no benefit out of that, having both goalies not playing. That is not going to happen. And Sawchenko and Harvey, I mentioned them earlier, they're both signed to AHL contracts. So unless one of them is signed to an NHL contract just for the sake of being able to call one up to the taxi squad,
right?
I really think there are more moves to be made.
Yeah.
And the Sharks have more cap space now to do it.
Right.
So if Bernier is the guy, maybe you ask Detroit to take $1 million or $1.5 million off that salary cap hit and help out, even though we have the room. But yeah.
Right.
I'm curious to see.
According to Cap Friendly, the Sharks now have $2.5 million in projected cap space after trading Dubnyk for Pateryn, which translates to $11 million in deadline cap space. So the Sharks can be that middle person here, and I know there were some people speculating being the middleman for the for like a Taylor Hall trade from Buffalo. So it'll remain to be seen. There are some options out there for the Sharks to pick up some picks in the upcoming draft or future drafts, or get some value from maybe some prospects in organizations. That'll remain to seen. That being said, there have been other trades that have gone down within the last hour. I think the Dubnyk trade to Colorado was the one that kind of started everything. But you see Brandon Montour going from Buffalo to Florida for a third. He's already, saying that he's already excited to get down there. Per Pierre LeBrun, Brandon Montour via text message says he's pumped about being traded to Florida. Fresh start, super excited to finish strong.
And Brandon Montour was a highly touted prospect that was absolutely atrocious for the Sabres, both last year and this year. So he definitely needs a fresh start. That says to me, Erik, though, that the Panthers maybe missed out on someone they were trying to get. Because we've seen this week they traded Vinny Hinostroza, they traded Brett Connolly, looking to acquire cap space. Now, there's still 2 days left, but looking to acquire open up cap space to acquire someone else, and they get Brandon Montour. I don't know.
It could be, or the price could be high. That's another thing too.
Right.
Per Frank Saravelli, as we await details, David Savard has been notified he's been traded to the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Yep.
So we wonder what that return is.
I know that Gabriel Carlson is part of the return going to well, no, Gabriel Carlson I think was on Columbus also. So that hang on, did I read that right?
No.
It's Savard and Carlson?
No, I don't think so. I thought I saw somewhere that Carlson wasn't
okay.
a part of it. Pierre LeBrun, further on everything, is that hearing that the Blue Jackets could be getting a first-round pick if a David Savard trade to Tampa gets concluded. The trade isn't done yet. That was of 38 minutes ago. So we're keeping an eye on all of that. But there was another one that we missed out on.
I'm sorry. I misread. It says Gabriel Carlson is not part of the package for David Savard. So I misread that. That was Aaron Fort's line.
So that'll be interesting to see what happens there. I'm trying to see who else did we miss. Who else did we miss, Bud? I swear there was another one that I.
Now let me get back to my
So
transactions because
while he looks at that, we'll take some comments in the chat here.
yeah.
Vince G, I'd love San Jose to be a broker to for a Taylor Hall trade to gobble up some futures. That would be
We
interesting.
can hang his banner right next to Mike Hoffman.
Oh boy, yeah, but here's a part of being in it worked well with the whole uh, Mike Hoffman deal, and funny how that happens. But it's interesting to see what's going to go down. So,
And I hypothesize that the Panthers might be trying to get Taylor Hall, and that would essentially be a replacement for Mike Hoffman, which I want to say they sorely miss Mike Hoffman this year, but they're in first place. So do they?
do they? And for that matter, considering Hoffman hasn't had the best year, are they missing him that much?
I don't think he's a good fit for the Blues. Like I thought that the worst decision he made was leaving Florida because I thought he fit in really well with that team.
Deadline cap space for Florida, they're at 12 million. They're at 2.7 million with regular cap space going on right now. So they would, I mean, with 12 million in deadline cap space, you look at that Taylor Hall deal. If you can go and find a way to get it done, I think you do. That gives some cap relief to Buffalo, which, my goodness, Buffalo. And the tough part is that Taylor Hall's stats aren't exactly the best one, but he's an $8 million cap hit. You can maybe, figure out a spot for him. That might be one thing that might push Florida, who has been slowly progressing upward, and especially in this special, Central Division, where they're in a dogfight with the Carolina Hurricanes. Kevin, I mean, I know we've been around a bit, but my goodness, to see the Hurricanes and Panthers, go for a cup run, it reminds me.
I feel like the last time that happened, Ray Whitney was on the Florida Panthers with Pavel Bure.
and Brett Hedican was
Actually,
a Carolina
it probably
Hurricane,
was.
Right? So it's interesting to see what's going to happen there, but nothing yet. I mean, do you have
the only other trade that I saw was the one from yesterday, which was Patrick Nemeth going from the Red Wings back to Colorado. He played a couple of pretty good years with the Avalanche when they were rebuilding their team. He's someone that the organization knows pretty well, and that also made Greg Pateryn expendable because Pateryn was already on the taxi squad to begin with. And I also think that I should have mentioned this earlier, but I think with Greg Pateryn, I haven't actually looked at the roster numbers, but typically when you see those types of players get added to deals, it's usually because a team needs to move a body off the 50-man organizational roster. So I wouldn't be surprised if this trade is really Dubnyk for the fifth, and then just to move a body, Pateryn got moved to the Sharks, which is, again, why I feel like Pateryn might just be a paper transaction only, and maybe he gets moved for a seventh for a team looking a little bit more depth. Again, as we talked about earlier, in case you're just joining us, we did talk about Vlasic's injury. Pateryn is not going to be filling in for Vlasic by any means, but it is possible that if Vlasic is out long term and the Sharks aren't feeling comfortable with someone like Jarosz or Claesson stepping in, give Pateryn a shot and see what happens, because he was pretty good a couple of years ago for Dallas.
So I think that'll do it for us at the moment here. Again, to reiterate, Devan Dubnyk is now a member of the Colorado Avalanche, 5th-round pick, and Greg Pateryn come to San Jose in the deal. Unknown if he will be playing or be in the area for the game tonight. Of course, depending on Santa Clara County protocols, he may not be able to right away. But that's an interesting one part to see, especially since things are starting to happen in the NHL trade deadline. I expect it to be a slower one, but it should be an interesting one, especially you throw in the wrinkle that there's an expansion draft in the summertime as well. So teams will be getting ready for that. So in case you missed anything and you want to watch us again, check us out on tealtownusa.com or your favorite podcatcher. Everything listed down below: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, and of course always available at tealtownusa.com. So with that, Kevin, appreciate you jumping on with me here, and thank you. Of course, if anything else breaks, we will jump back on to inform everybody about this, because it's going to be an interesting one, and the Sharks are kind of an interesting spot here. They could go either way, but you kind of don't want them to be like go crazy and be like a buyer like Brian Campbell or Bill Guerin in the past. So
I don't think it's going to come to that.
No.
And I don't think the Sharks have the resources to do trades like that. But we'll see what happens. Marcus Sorensen's still to be watched for. Patrick Marleau, I still don't think Patrick Marleau gets traded. But you never know. A team might come calling with a 7th-round pick. You never know. But we'll see what happens. And also, of course, the Sharks play tonight. So we'll have more to say on After Dark about this trade and any others that may come in.
That's right. So that's it for us. He's at Kevin Lacy 22. I'm at PuckGuy14 on the Twitter and the Instagram. As Kevin said, we will be back with you later tonight for Teal Town After Dark following Sharks and Kings. That game is at 7:30. Until then, thanks for watching, and keep it teal. All right. This is how I'm out of it. Keep it real, keep it teal, keep it real teal. Have a great day, everyone. We will see you tonight following the Sharks and Kings on After Dark.